The small ship fell out of hyperspace like a wounded bird. Smoke poured from its engines. Its hull was torn open in 3 places. Inside, Ambassador Thala gripped her seat and prayed to God she had stopped believing in long ago. She had traveled for 18 days through enemy territory. She had watched her escort ships die one by one. She was alone, and Earth hung before her like a blue marble in the darkness. She did not want to be here. Nobody wanted to come to Earth. The humans were violent creatures. The galaxy had learned, this a century ago, when the Keth Dominion tried to conquer their little world. The humans had fought back with such fury that the Keth retreated in shame. Since then, humanity had stayed quiet, hidden behind their sun, building things in secret. The rest of the galaxy was happy to forget them, but Thala had no choice. 7 billion of her people were already dead. The Keth were burning the Orvani worlds one by one. Now the coalition of 12 species was falling apart. Nobody could stop the Keth war machine. Nobody except perhaps the monsters of Earth. Her ship limped toward the orbital station called Heaven's Gate. It was enormous, a ring of metal and light that circled the planet. Human vessels moved around it like fish around a reef. Thala noticed they were all warships. The humans had no merchant fleet, no pleasure craft. Everything they built was designed for war. A voice crackled through her communication system. It was cold and professional. Identify yourself, or be destroyed. Thala transmitted her diplomatic codes. There was a long silence. Then the voice returned, slightly warmer. Ambassador, you are cleared to dock. Medical teams are standing by. She landed in a bay filled with soldiers. They wore gray uniforms and carried weapons she did not recognize. Their faces were hard but not cruel. A young officer helped her out of her ship and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. She had not expected kindness. They took her to a room high in the station. Through the windows, she could see Earth below, covered in clouds and ocean. It looked peaceful. She knew it was not. The door opened, and Admiral Kong Do-yan walked in. He was not what she expected. He was neither tall nor muscular. His hair was gray at the temples, and his eyes were tired. He looked like someone who had seen too much death and carried it with him everywhere. Behind him came 3 officers, including a young woman with sharp eyes and a man with a datapad clutched in his hands. Do-yan sat across from Thala. He did not speak, simply waited. Thala activated her holographic projector. Images filled the room, burning cities, bodies floating in space, children screaming as Keth soldiers marched through the streets. She showed him everything. The massacre at Orvani Prime, the slave camps on the outer moons, the Keth fleet, thousands of ships strong, moving from world to world like a plague. The officers behind Do-yan watched in silence. The young woman's hands curled into fists. The man with the datapad stopped breathing. But the Admiral did not move. He watched every image, every death, every horror. His face showed nothing. When the projection ended, Thala spoke. Her voice was shaking. We have nowhere else to go. The coalition is broken. Our fleets are destroyed. The Keth will not stop until every Orvani is dead. She paused, searching for the right words. We know humans are difficult. We know you do not trust the galaxy, and the galaxy does not trust you. But we are begging. Please, help us.
Right.
Silence filled the room. Do-yan finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. How soon can we reach the front lines? Thala blinked. She had prepared for negotiation. She had expected demands for territory, resources, political power. She had practiced speeches about mutual benefit and strategic alliance. But Do-yan was not asking for payment. He was asking for directions. 3 weeks through hyperspace, she managed. Maybe less if your ships are fast. Do-yan nodded. He turned to the young woman. Captain Yun, begin fleet mobilization. Full combat readiness. The woman, Yun Hannah, smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who had been waiting too long in a cage. Yes, Admiral. Do-yan turned to the man with the datapad. Lieutenant Bay, contact Commander Park on the Eternal Dawn. Tell her we need the carrier ready in 72 hours. Lieutenant Bay Taiho nodded and rushed from the room. Thala could not understand. You are agreeing just like that? You do? Not want anything in return? Doyon stood and walked to the window. He looked down at Earth, at the blue oceans and green continents. A long time ago, he said, my ancestors lived on a small peninsula. They were surrounded by enemies. Larger nations tried to conquer them again and again. Sometimes they succeeded. My people know what it means to suffer under the boot of empires. He turned to face her. We also know what it means when no one comes to help. He walked to the door and paused. Ambassador, humanity is not joining your war for profit or power. We are joining because it is the right thing to do. Someone is hurting your people, and you cannot stop them alone. That is all we need to know. After he left, Thala sat in the empty room for a long time. She thought about everything she knew about humans. The stories said they were violent and dangerous. Stories said they could not be trusted. Stories said they cared only for themselves. The stories, she realized, were wrong. Somewhere in the asteroid belt, hidden from every scanner in the galaxy, shipyard doors began to open. Warships that had waited in darkness for 100 years powered up their engines. Crews ran to their stations, and weapon systems came online. Earth's deadliest warships answered the call, and the echoes would ripple across the galaxy forever. The asteroid belt had kept its secrets for a century. Now, those secrets woke up. Captain Yunhana stood on the bridge of the black horizon and watched the shipyard doors open. Dust that had gathered for decades floated away into space. Lights flickered on inside the massive structure, and then the ships began to emerge. They came out one by one. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships. Each one was painted black as night, with the symbol of United Earth on their hulls. They had been built in secret, crewed by volunteers who never spoke of their work, and hidden from a galaxy that had forgotten humanity existed. Hannah counted 47 warships before she stopped. There were more behind them, still powering up, still waking from their long sleep. She had served in the fleet for 15 years, and even she had not known how many ships humanity had built. Her communication officer spoke. Captain, the Hammer of Soul is requesting fleet-wide synchronization. Granted, Hannah said. Admiral Doyon's voice filled every bridge in the fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Kong. In 3 days, we enter hyperspace. In 3 weeks, we reach the Vareth system, where the Keith are destroying an Orvani colony. Our mission is simple. Stop them. He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. I will not lie to you. Many of us will not return. The Keth have more ships, more soldiers, more experience. Every simulation says we cannot win. Another pause. But simulations do not know humans. They do not know what we are willing to sacrifice for people we have never met. They do not know that we fight hardest when we fight for others. Hannah felt something warm spread through her chest. Pride. Purpose. She had waited her whole life for this moment. 3 days, Doyon continued. Use them well. Write your letters. Say your goodbyes. And then stand ready. Because when we arrive, the galaxy will learn what humanity truly is. The communication ended. Hannah turned to her crew. They were young, most of them. Lieutenant Bei Taiho, her tactical officer, was barely 30. Her helmsman was 25. Her weapons officer had just graduated from the academy. They were children playing at war, but their eyes burned with determination. They had heard the Admiral's words, and they believed. You heard him, Hannah said. We have 3 days. I want every system checked twice, every weapon calibrated, every shield generator at full power. When we meet the Keth, I want them to know they made a terrible mistake. The crew moved with purpose. Hannah watched them for a moment, then walked to her private quarters. She had her own letter to write. On the carrier Eternal Dawn, Commander Park Soo-jin had not slept in 2 days. Her engineering teams were working around the clock to install new systems. The Orvani had brought technology that could help human ships communicate with coalition forces, but the integration was proving difficult. She stood in the main hangar surrounded by cables and open panels. Sparks flew as her engineers welded new components into place. Somewhere above her, 1,000 fighter craft waited in their bays, ready to launch. Ambassador Thala approached carefully. The Orvani woman had been watching the humans work, and she could not hide her amazement. "Do your people ever rest?" Sujin laughed. It was a tired laugh. "We will rest when the job is done. On Orvani Prime, a project like this would take months. Your people have done it in hours. We do not have months." Sujin wiped sweat from her forehead. "We have 3 days, so we will finish in 3 days." Thala was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke again. "I brought someone to meet you. She is an elder of my people. Her name is Mevin." An old Orvani woman stepped forward. Her skin was pale blue, and her eyes held the weight of centuries. She looked at Sujin with an expression that was hard to read. "Commander Park," Mevin said, "I have studied your species for a very long time. I know things about humanity that most of the galaxy has forgotten." Sujin raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Your people nearly destroyed yourselves many times. Wars, weapons, hate. You came so close to extinction that the galaxy assumed you would finish the job on your own." Mevin smiled, but it was a sad smile. "We were wrong. The fire that nearly killed you is the same fire that keeps you alive. You fight like there is no tomorrow because you have faced tomorrow and found it empty. And now you bring that fire to us." Sujin did not know what to say. She returned to her work. In the fighter bay of the Eternal Dawn, Ensign Lee Minho sat alone. He was 22 years old. He had graduated from flight school 6 months ago. He had never seen real combat. He held a paper letter in his hands. Real paper, the kind his grandmother used to give him? He was trying to write to his family, but the words would not come. What could he say? That he was scared? That he did not know if he would survive? That he was flying across the galaxy to fight an enemy he had never seen, for people he had never met? He wrote, "Dear Mother and Father, I am well. The fleet is preparing to leave. I do not know when I will return." He stopped. That was not enough. He tried again. "I wanted you to know that I am proud to serve. I know you wanted me to be a doctor or an engineer, something safe. But when I heard about the Orvani, about the children dying on those worlds, I knew I had to go. I could not live with myself if I stayed home while others suffered." He read the words back. They sounded foolish, childish, but they were true. Around him 1,000 other young soldiers wrote their own letters. Some cried. Some laughed. Some sat in silence, staring at blank paper. 3 days later, the fleet entered hyperspace. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared. Ahead of them, the unknown waited. Mina watched the stars stretch into lines of light. He folded his letter and put it in his pocket, close to his heart. If he died, someone would find it. Someone would send it home. And if he lived, would deliver it himself. The Vareth system was burning from orbit. General Kreth watched his ships bombard the colony below. Plasma fire rained down on Orvani's cities. Buildings melted. Rivers boiled. Millions of creatures ran through the streets, screaming, dying. It was beautiful in its own way. Kreth had conquered 17 worlds for the Dominion. He had killed more enemies than he could count. The Orvani were weak, like all the coalition species. They begged. They cried. They died easily. This campaign would add another victory to his record, another medal to his collection. His censor officer interrupted his thoughts. "General, we are detecting ships exiting hyperspace." Kreth turned. "Coalition reinforcements? How many?" "Unknown, sir. The signatures are strange. We do not recognize the design." The general walked to the viewport. In the distance, flashes of light appeared as ships dropped out of hyperspace. They were smaller than Keth vessels, black as the void itself. They moved in tight formation like predators hunting in a pack. "Identify them," Kreth ordered. A moment of silence. "Then, General, they are human ships." Kreth laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound. "Humans? Those primitive mammals? I thought they were hiding on their little rock, too afraid to leave." "Apparently not, sir. I count. 63 warships. More are still arriving." The general's laughter faded. 63 ships was not a small force. But his fleet numbered over 200. The humans were outnumbered more than 3-1. Let them come. Today, they learn why the galaxy fears the Keth. On the Hammer of Sol, Admiral Doyon studied the tactical display. The Keth fleet was large, larger than intelligence had suggested. 208 warships, including 4 dreadnoughts the size of small moons. His own fleet was tiny in comparison. Lieutenant Bei Taiho spoke from his station. Admiral, the enemy is forming a defensive line. They are protecting the troop carriers in orbit, which means civilians are still alive on the surface, Doyon said. They are still loading slaves. Yes, sir. Doyon nodded slowly. Then we must move quickly. Order all ships to attack formation. Captain Yun will lead the destroyer wing. Tell her to aim for the dreadnoughts. Taiho blinked. Sir, the dreadnoughts. They are the most heavily armed ships in the enemy fleet. Exactly. The Keth expects us to attack the smaller ships first. They expect us to be cautious. Doyon's eyes were cold as ice. We will not be cautious. We will be human. The black horizon surged forward at maximum speed. Around Captain Yunhana, 12 destroyers followed in tight formation. They were the tip of the spear, the first to strike, the first to die. All weapons online, her tactical officer reported. Shields at maximum, her helmsman added. Nomi Dreadnought is targeting us, another voice called. They are charging main guns. Hannah smiled. Good. Let them focus on us. That is exactly what we want. The Keth Dreadnought fired. A beam of pure energy lanced through space, bright enough to blind sensors. It struck a destroyer on Hannah's left. The ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. Stay on target, Hannah ordered. Her voice did not shake. All ships, prepare torpedoes. The destroyers closed the distance. More beams filled the void. Another ship died. Then another. But the human vessels did not slow down. They did not retreat. They accelerated. General Kreth watched the human charge with growing confusion. What are they doing? This is suicide. His tactical officer shook his head. They are not slowing down, sir. They are heading directly for your command ship. Possible. No one is that foolish. But the humans kept coming. The black horizon reached torpedo range. Hannah gave the order. Fire everything. 12 torpedoes launched from her ship alone. Across the destroyer wing, hundreds more followed. The weapons streaked through space, weaving past defensive fire, slamming into the dreadnought's hull. The massive ship shuddered. Explosions rippled across its surface. Its engines flickered and died. Direct hit on enemy command ship, Taiho reported from the Hammer of Sol. Their flagship is disabled. Admiral Doyun allowed himself a small nod. Now the real battle begins. All ships engage at will. The fleet crashed into the Keth formation like a hammer striking glass. Human ships were smaller and faster. They danced between the massive enemy vessels, striking weak points, withdrawing, striking again. The Keth tried to respond, but their systems were too slow. By the time they aimed their weapons, the humans had already moved in his fighter. Ensign Lee Min-ho flew through a storm of fire. His squadron had launched minutes ago with orders to destroy the troop carriers in orbit. Those ships held thousands of Orvani prisoners, slaves being transported to Kethwork camps. Stay tight, his squadron leader ordered. We go through the debris field. The enemy will not expect us. They flew through the wreckage of a destroyed Keth cruiser. Metal fragments bounced off their shields. Smoke and fire surrounded them. Minho could barely see, but he did not slow down. His wingman exploded beside him. Then another pilot. Then another. Keep going. The squadron leader shouted. Almost there. Minho saw the troop carrier ahead. It was huge and ugly, built for function, not beauty. He could imagine the prisoners inside packed together like animals, waiting for a death that would never come. He fired. His missiles struck the carrier's engines. The ship lurched, then stopped moving. It was disabled, not destroyed. The prisoners would survive. The battle lasted for hours. When it ended, the Keth fleet was broken. 73 enemy ships were destroyed. Another 50 were too damaged to fight. General Kreth died on his bridge when his dreadnought finally exploded, But victory came at a cost. 22 human ships were gone. 4,000 sailors would never go home. On the Hammer of Soul, Admiral Doyon looked at the casualty reports. His hands trembled slightly. He had known this would happen. He had prepared for it. But knowing and feeling were different things. Sir Taiho said quietly, "The enemy is retreating. We have won." Doya nodded. "Today? Yes. But the war is just beginning." He turned to face his crew. Their faces were exhausted but proud. They had done the impossible. They had shown the galaxy what humans could do, and the galaxy was watching the Orvani. Survivors came out of their shelters slowly. They had hidden underground for days, listening to the explosions above, waiting for death. When the sound stopped, they expected Keth's soldiers to come for them. Instead, they found humans. Commander Park Sujin walked through the ruined streets with a team of engineers. Her uniform was dirty. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but she smiled at every survivor she passed, trying to show them they were safe now. A young Orvani child stood in the doorway of a collapsed building. Her skin was covered in dust, and her eyes were wide with fear. She could not have been more than 6 years old. Sujin knelt down to the child's level. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of chocolate. Real chocolate from Earth. She held it out to the child. The girl looked at the strange brown object. She looked at Sujin. Then, slowly, she took the chocolate and put it in her mouth. Her eyes went wide again, but this time with wonder. "It is sweet," the girl said. "Yes," Sujin replied. "It is from my home. Very far away." The girl smiled. It was the first smile anyone on this world had seen in weeks. Across the colony, human soldiers distributed food, medicine, and water. They set up temporary shelters for those who had lost their homes. They carried the wounded to medical stations and treated them with care. They buried the dead with respect, both Orvani and Keth. Ambassador Thala walked through the recovery zone with tears in her eyes. She had expected the humans to leave after the battle. She had expected them to demand payment, or territory, or political power. Instead, they stayed. She found Captain Yunhana in the debris field, commanding rescue operations from her damaged ship. The Black Horizon had barely survived the battle. Its hull was torn open in a dozen places. Its engines were running on backup power. But Hannah refused to leave. Captain Thala said, "Your ship needs repairs. You should return to the fleet." Hannah shook her head. "There are still escape pods out there. Orvani and Keth both. We are not leaving until everyone is recovered. You are rescuing Keth's survivors." After what they did, Hannah looked at the ambassador with tired eyes. "We are not them. That is the whole point." Thala did not understand, but she was beginning to. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like wildfire. Coalition species watched the footage in stunned silence. The humans had not just won. They had won while protecting civilians. They had won while showing mercy to their enemies. They had won in a way no one thought possible. On the Orvani homeworld, crowds gathered in the streets to watch the broadcasts. They saw human soldiers sharing food with children. They saw human doctors treating the wounded. They saw human engineers rebuilding water systems and power grids. These were the monsters they had feared for a century. These were the violent primitives the galaxy had tried to forget. The stories had been wrong. Elder Avon stood before the Coalition Council and spoke words that would echo through history. For 100 years, we called humanity dangerous. We called them violent. We called them unfit for galactic society. Today, we know the truth. They are dangerous, yes. They are violent, yes. But they are dangerous to those who harm the innocent. They are violent toward those who prey on the weak. And they are more fit for galactic society than any of us have ever been. The council was silent. Then, slowly they began to applaud. Admiral Doyon refused every honor they tried to give him. He refused territory. He refused resources. He refused a seat on the Coalition Council. "We did not come for payment," he said again and again. We came because it was right. The coalition leaders did not understand. How could a species fight so hard and ask for nothing? How could they sacrifice so much without expecting reward? Elder Mevin understood. She explained the human concept to anyone who would listen. They have a word for it, she said. Conscience. It is a voice inside them that speaks when others suffer. It tells them they must act, even when action brings pain. They cannot ignore it. They have tried. For centuries they tried. But the voice always wins. On Earth, there were no celebrations. The casualty lists were too long. Families received messages telling them their children, their parents, their siblings would not be coming home. Memorials were built. Flowers were laid. Tears were shed, but something else happened too. Recruitment centers opened across the planet and lines formed around the block. Young people who had never considered military service suddenly wanted to join. Old veterans who had retired long ago asked to return to duty. A reporter asked one young recruit why she was joining. She was barely 18, with bright eyes and a determined jaw. Her answer was simple. I saw what our people did out there, she said. They did not fight for land or money or power. They fought because someone needed help. I want to be part of that. I want to be the kind of person who answers when someone calls. Lieutenant Bei Taiho watched the broadcast from the Hammer of Soul. He was recovering from wounds he had received during the battle, but he refused to stay in the medical bay. There was too much work to do. Ensign Lee Min-ho sat beside him. The young pilot had survived the battle, though half his squadron had not. He carried their names in his heart now. He would carry them forever. Do you think it was worth it? Min-ho asked quietly. All those deaths, all that pain, was it worth it? Taiho looked out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Keth were regrouping. The war was far from over. More battles would come. More names would be added to the memorial lists. But somewhere out there, an Orvani child was eating chocolate for the first time. A family was sleeping in a shelter instead of a slave ship. A world was beginning to heal instead of burn. As Taiho said, it was worth it. Min-ho nodded slowly. He pulled the letter from his pocket, the one he had written before the battle. He had not sent it yet. He had been waiting to see if he survived. He walked to the communication console and typed in his parents' address. Then he pressed send. Somewhere on Earth, a mother and father would read his words and know their son was alive. They would know he was proud. They would know he was coming home, but not yet. There was still work to do. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had only just begun. 3 months later, the combined fleet arrived at the Keth homeworld. Admiral Kung Do-yan stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Hammer of Soul and looked at the enemy forces ahead. Prelet Vorin had gathered every remaining Keth warship for this final stand. 400 vessels filled the void, arranged in a wall of metal and fire. Behind them, the Keth homeworld glowed with city lights and defensive platforms. This was the end. One way or another, the war would finish here. Lieutenant Bei Taiho spoke from his station. His arm was still bandaged from wounds that had not fully healed. Admiral, the coalition fleet is in position. They are awaiting your orders. Do-yan nodded. The coalition had sent 200 ships of their own, crewed by species that had once feared humanity. Now they followed human leadership into battle. Things had changed since the first fight at Vareth. Open a channel, Do-yan said. All ships. The communication connected. Across the fleet, soldiers and sailors stopped what they were doing to listen. Human and alien alike. They knew this moment would define the future. Today, we end this war, Do-yan said. The Keth Dominion has killed billions. They have enslaved millions more. They have burned worlds and shattered families. They believe the galaxy belongs to the strong, and the weak exist only to serve. He paused. We are here to teach them otherwise. The fleet surged forward. Prelate Vorin watched the enemy approach with hatred burning in his hearts. He had broadcast a message across the galaxy, calling humans monsters. He had described their violence, their aggression, their refusal to accept the natural order. The galaxy should have listened. The galaxy should have united against these Preverse. Instead, the galaxy joined them. All ships, Vorin commanded, fire at will. The battle was unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Ships clashed in waves of fire and metal. Explosions lit the void like stars being born and dying. The Keth fought with desperation, knowing their civilization depended on this moment. The combined fleet fought with determination. Knowing the future depended on theirs, Captain Yanhana led what remained of the destroyer wing in a strike against HFY Keth orbital defenses. The Black Horizon had been rebuilt, but it still bore scars from the first battle. Hannah wore those scars with pride. "Target the weapon platforms," she ordered. "We clear the path for the main fleet." Her ships danced through enemy fire, striking with precision that bordered on impossible. The Keth defenses began to fall one by one. Ensign Lee Minho, no longer an ensign, but a full lieutenant, led his fighter squadron through the chaos. He had lost half his pilots at Vareth. He had trained a new squadron since then, teaching them everything he knew. Now he watched some of them die, just as the first squadron had died. But he did not stop. He could not stop. The people behind him were counting on him to clear the way. "Stay tight," he told his pilots. "We go through together." They struck the last defensive platform, and it exploded in a brilliant flash. The path to the Keth homeworld was open. On the Hammer of Soul, Doyen watched the battle unfold with quiet focus. The Keth were fighting hard, but they were losing. Their formation was breaking. Their ships were dying faster than they could replace them. And then, Vorin played his final card. A massive platform emerged from behind the Keth homeworld. It was larger than any ship, larger than any station. Its surface bristled with weapons, and at its center, a beam of energy began to charge. "What is that?" Taiho asked, his voice tight. "A planet killer," Doyan said quietly. They were saving it for last. The weapon charged. If it fired, it would destroy the entire combined fleet in a single shot. Thousands of ships, millions of lives. Gone in an instant. Hannah saw the weapon charging. She saw the distance between her ship and the platform. She saw the numbers, and she made her choice. "All destroyers form on me," she commanded. "Maximum speed, Captain?" her helmsman asked. "What are you planning?" Hannah smiled. It was a peaceful smile. The smile of someone who had found their purpose. "We are going to ram that platform. Our ships are too small to survive the collision, but the impact will trigger our reactor cores. The explosion will destroy the weapon before it fires." Silence on the bridge. "Then, Captain, that is suicide." "Yes," Hannah agreed. "It is." The destroyers followed their captain. They accelerated past safe limits, pushing their engines until the metal screamed. The planet killer charged. The destroyers flew faster. Hannah thought of her family. She thought of her crew. She thought of the children on the Orvani colony who had smiled when they saw human soldiers. She thought of the future that would exist because of what she was about to do. She closed her eyes. The Black Horizon struck the platform at full speed. The impact was catastrophic. The reactor cores detonated. The platform exploded in a wave of fire and radiation that consumed everything nearby. When the light faded, the planet killer was gone. The Keth fleet surrendered within hours. Prelit Vorin was brought before Admiral Doyan in chains, expecting execution. Instead, Doyan offered terms: disarmament, reparations, freedom for every slave, justice for war criminals, but no genocide, no enslavement, no revenge. Vorin did not understand. "We would have destroyed you. We tried to destroy you. Why do you show mercy?" Doyan looked at the defeated leader with tired eyes. "Because if we killed every Keth, we would become what we fought against. Humanity does not win by becoming monsters. We win by refusing to." Years later, Elder Mevin wrote a new history of the galaxy. She dedicated an entire chapter to the day the Earth fleet answered the call. She wrote about the battles and the sacrifices. She wrote about the victory and the mercy. She wrote about a species that crossed the stars not for power or profit, but because someone needed help. On Earth, a memorial wall stretched 4 kilometers. Millions of names were carved into stone. Young cadets walked past every day reading the names. Learning the cost of being human, Captain Yunhana's name was near the center. Lieutenant Bei Taiho visited it every year on the anniversary of the final battle. He would stand in silence, remembering the woman who had taught him what courage truly meant. And somewhere in deep space, distress signal echoed through the void. A species no one had heard of was dying, begging for help from anyone who would listen. A human ship changed course, because that is what humans do. The echoes of their choice would ripple across the galaxy forever.